Advaitam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dvandvatitam Gagana Sadrisham Tattvamasya Dilaksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadi Sakshi Bhutam Bhavatitam Shaguna Rahitam Sadgurum Tam Namami. Om Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Ganesha, Jai Ganesha, Jai Ganesha, Pahimam. Shri Ganesha, Shri Ganesha, Shri Ganesha, Rakshamam. Jai Saraswati, Jai Saraswati, Jai Saraswati, Pahimam. Shri Saraswati, Shri Saraswati, Shri Saraswati, Rakshamam. Jai Shri Lakshmi, Jai Shri Lakshmi, Jai Shri Lakshmi, Pahimam. Jai Shri Lakshmi, Jai Shri Lakshmi, Jai Shri Lakshmi, Rakshama. Jaya Guru Shiva Guru Hari Guru Ram. Jagadaguru Paramaguru Sadguru Sham. Adi Guru Advait Guru Ananda Guru Om. Chida Guru Chirgana Guru Chinmaya Guru Om. Om Tat Sat, Om Tat Sat, Om Tat Sat, Om. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om. Om Tat Sat. Divine blessings to each one of you attending this evening's Yoga Vasistha Satsanga. I hope everyone is doing well. And I wanted to open with a quote from Guruji Swami Nikhilananda's Art of Spiritual Living book that he was able to accomplish publishing last year. And since we've been going over the topic of self-effort and destiny, I wanted to read one of his quotes that was in regards to destiny. You are the architect of your destiny. It is your choice whether to build a hut or a mansion. Start making conscious choices and see the outcome beforehand in your mind's eye. This is using your foresight and can prevent many mistakes. The law of karma is profound. We reap what we sow. If we sow thorns, how can we expect a mango tree to emerge? Spirituality is not meant for lazy people. As the saying goes, God helps those who help themselves. If we introspect deeply, we will realize that we get what is due to us according to our karmas or deeds. The divine plan is perfect, even though we may not feel that way when facing difficult situations. So that was something that I found appropriate for this evening. And sorry if I seem really tired. I'm still adjusting to some new medications, which has been a challenge. But I'm doing okay. So please let me know if there's any audio or video issues, if you can hear me or not. And we are picking back up. We are still in the Mumukshu Vyavahara Prakarana from Book 1 of Yoga Vasistha. And this is the translation and a bit of commentary from Swami Jyotirmayanandaji. And you can purchase the scripture from the yrf.org website, the Yoga Research Foundation. And where we left off last week, Sage Vasistha was talking about the importance of self-effort and talking to Lord Rama. And we have to remember Lord Rama was a child at this point. He was very young, like 5 or 6 years old. And they were discussing the importance of self-effort and then negating the topic of destiny and relying on destiny. And so that's where we'll carry on this evening, and we'll try to cover 2 sections again, but I'll try not to go as long as I did last week. But they go hand in hand. So section 7, Predominance of Self-Effort. O Rama, having developed a healthy mind in a healthy body, one must devote one's life to the cherished goal of divine realization in order to terminate the possibility of recurring birth and death. And so this brings to light the importance of having a healthy mind, like in general, our thoughts that are going on in the mind, and a healthy body, like physically being healthy is important. And then the goal of human embodiment is divine realization or self-realization, God realization, whatever terms you want to use. And when one reaches divine realization, that terminates the recurring cycle of birth and death. And so coming back and basically doing everything over again. Whoever wills to overcome destiny by his self-effort attains fulfillment of all his desires, whether they are of this world or of the world hereafter. And so it's by self-will, because with human embodiment, we have will. We have that power of choice, whereas in other embodiments, like lower embodiments, we would not have that. And so by our will and the will to overcome destiny, by putting in our self-effort, you can attain the desires such as spiritual desires and aspirations, or if you're someone that has worldly desires that you're focused on or working towards, no matter what it is, when self-effort is put forward and put into these goals, then you will overcome destiny, per se. But those who use fictitious destiny as an excuse for turning away from their self-effort kill their very self. They fail in all 4 aspects of self-effort: dharma, ethical fulfillment; artha, material security; kama, vital pleasure; and moksha, the infinite bliss of the self. And so when people use destiny, which is illusory, it's fictitious, when people use it as an excuse to not put in self-effort, it's like killing the self, like the divine self. Not literally killing, but you're diminishing that inner self, the inner divine power of the self. And it's like, you imagine like the self, like, I have a candle, so I'll try to use this as an example. And so if you imagine the light from the candle as the light of the self, and then because of ignorance, and then relying on destiny, which is fictitious. And if you have it as like more layers and more layers and more layers, that light gets covered up. And so it's still there, but it doesn't shine as bright and it's weaker. And so due to ignorance and lack of self-effort, and then relying on destiny, using it as an excuse to turn away from our duties and the actions, like physical actions, practical actions that are required in order to succeed in things, it's like they're diminishing their self. And so people will fail in the 4 aspects of self-effort. So ethical fulfillment, they're not following like proper ethics, because it's not ethical to just kind of sit back and rely on destiny without putting in self-effort. And they're failing at material security, because even for material security, one must put in self-effort. That's part of practical living. Vital pleasures of the worldly embodiment, even that requires self-effort. And moksha, the infinite bliss of the self, requires, once again, self-effort. And so they're failing at all 4 of these things when relying on destiny. Self-effort in a person expresses in these basic forms. Samvitspanda, the vibration of consciousness. Manaspanda, the vibration of mind. And Indriya Spanda, the vibration of the senses. It is the vibration of consciousness that urges an aspirant to develop a strong resolve to attain self-realization. Thus, Samvitspanda is the basis for the Manaspanda in a person. When the mind begins to vibrate in a particular manner, the senses are led to function accordingly. Thus, Manaspanda results in Indriya Spanda. With the vibration of the senses, there arise various activities in one's physical personality. And so, when we think more deeply about this and we reflect more on this, if you start off at consciousness and you imagine it building up energy and vibrating, and then this kind of vibrates outward and causes the vibration of the mind. And then when the mind has those vibrations and that energy, those go outwards towards the senses. And then the senses build up the energy and the vibration, and those senses go outwards towards the world. So they're all kind of going outwards in this moment. But it's the vibration of consciousness that urges the aspirant to develop the strong resolve to attain self-realization. So within the consciousness, there's a vibration, there's that spark where something, it can be different for everybody. Something happens where it just kind of triggers, it sparks that urge, that deep aspiration within to seek, and that's the part of the journey where you kind of become a seeker. And so you're starting to seek out those answers to the questions of why, why are we here? What is our purpose? Who are we? Those kinds of things. And so an aspirant develops a strong resolve to attain self-realization. And so because of that, Samvitspanda, which is the vibration of consciousness, is the basis for Manaspanda, which is vibration of mind. And so you have to have that trigger of a strong resolve and aspiration for self-realization. That's kind of like your foundation of your spiritual journey. And then next is the Manaspanda, where due to this aspiration, due to this auspicious desire, the mind begins to vibrate. And when the mind begins to vibrate, that then triggers the Indriya Spanda, which is the vibration of the senses. And so you start thinking about things and reflecting and pondering on things. And then that kind of triggers the person into using the senses and the functions of the body accordingly, according to the scriptures, and using them for the goal of self-realization. The process of self-effort embraces every part of the individual. The innermost spirit, his intellect, mind, senses, and body. So this reminded me of what Guruji used to teach us. And he would teach us that putting in our self-effort on our spiritual journey towards self-realization was like churning milk to get butter. And so you have to keep on churning, and you have to put in self-effort, and over time, eventually, you get butter from the milk. And then it can also make you think of a sculptor shaping like clay and making pottery, and you're taking something and you're putting in effort and you're creating from this self-effort. And I actually printed a picture to use as an example, or at least I thought I did. I guess it did not print. No, it did not print. Okay, so if you look up Self-Made Man Sculpture by Bobby Carlyle. I don't know if I can pop it into the... No, it won't let me. So if you look up the Self-Made Man Sculpture by Bobby Carlyle, basically it's this, I think it's bronze sculpture of a man sculpting himself from the material, and what it represents is the self-effort of man and putting dedication into whatever your endeavor, your goal is. And so that's like it's a nice example to kind of put it in a perspective that you're using all the parts of the body, the senses, and the mind. And because of this process of self-effort and using all parts of the individual, you can chisel out your destiny. And that's how you are the architect of your destiny. The witnessing consciousness develops an awareness of the objective world due to its ignorance. It is like a serene lake, developing an awareness of the reflected scenes of nature. As a result of this limited knowledge, the mind is projected by the self and is set into motion. Mental vibrations are accompanied by the vibrations of the senses. The mind is an extension of consciousness. Like I mentioned earlier, how they're kind of like connected and they start reaching outwards. The senses are an extension of the mind, and then the world is an extension of the senses. The underlying theme in one's self-effort is to realize that the essential glory of the self untainted by the reflections of the world process. And so our self within us is not tainted by the world outside of us. It is untouched. And we can look back into the scripture of the Bhagavad Gita where Lord Krishna explains how that self, the true essence of who we all are at our core, is you can't burn it, it can't get wet, you can't destroy it, you can't cut it. that is our self. That is the true self that is within all of us. And so, due to ignorance, we identify ourself with the body, with the physical body. And that's just due to ignorance. The mental aspect of self-effort predominates during our meditation. While chanting mantras and offering praises to the deity, vocal effort gains predominance over other forms of effort. During travel, physical effort gains supremacy over mental and vocal efforts. Thus, men are led to success by adopting different forms of self-effort. Destiny is nothing but a myth. So this is a good example of how no matter what we're doing, we are always putting in self-effort. So even traveling, there's going to be self-effort into making that possible. So we can think of Guru Ma right now and her travels to India, and the self-effort that she had to put in to make that happen, and the supportive people around her who are also there making that happen, and the self-effort to go through this long pilgrimage, which can be challenging. And that doesn't just happen due to destiny. That happens due to self-effort that has been put in the current embodiment or previous embodiments. And so that's like a practical example. And then there's the effort of when we're chanting our mantras or singing kirtan or bhajans, there's self-effort in the voice. And during our meditations, there is also self-effort, because we're putting in that self-effort of concentration, whether it's on the breath, or bringing the awareness like to in between the eyebrows and the one-pointed focusness, and effort turning inwards, turning the senses off. So there's always going to be self-effort, and self-effort is what leads us to success. And so there's many different ways of self-effort. There's not just one way of self-effort. It is by the virtue of self-effort that Brihaspati became the preceptor of the gods. So my printer did work for that. Okay, so here you can see Brihaspati, the preceptor of the gods, and that is who gives guidance and wisdom to the gods. Sukracharya became the teacher of the demons. And so even though he became the teacher of demons, it was through self-effort. So it might not have been for something auspicious, but he still accomplished his goal. Many who are extremely poor and miserable attain prosperity, power, and glory beyond human expectations. The Puranas are filled with many such examples, and many who were immensely prosperous were brought down to unimaginably deplorable conditions in life as a result of their negative self-effort. So with our positive self-effort and auspicious self-efforts that we put into things, that helps us on the progress of our spiritual journey and our spiritual evolution, whereas the lack of self-effort is going to pull us back, that negative self-effort. And so we'll come back in future embodiments in a more, you could be put in a more challenging situation, a more challenging environment or family, a lower embodiment of animals, creatures, things like that. And we can also think of later on Lord Rama in the Ramayana. Trying to make sure you can see the full picture. And so this scene is from when Lord Rama and Hanumanji were building the bridge to Lanka, because Hanumanji, he was putting in all the self-effort, as well as others, to help Lord Rama rescue Sita, and that was all due to self-effort. That wasn't sitting back and letting destiny take over or anything. There was much self-effort put into that, especially during that time, realizing the power that he had within him and remembering who he was. And then we can also think of in the Bhagavad Gita, where you had Lord Krishna and Arjuna in the battlefield, and Arjuna was being lectured, being taught by Lord Krishna to stand up, do your duties, put in the self-effort. There's no point in sitting back and doing nothing, because whether you fight or you don't fight, these people on the battlefield, they're all going to die anyways. And so you may as well put in the self-effort, because that is what is good, that is what is auspicious, that is what is according to the scriptures. And so there's many examples amongst all the different scriptures where you can see that there was self-effort put forth. All of the numerous conditions of prosperity and adversity that people encounter are a result of their self-effort alone. So the conditions that we find ourselves in, whether they're seen as positive or negative, good, bad, easy, challenging, prosperity, adversity, it's a result of not just the self-effort that we put in this current embodiment, this current lifetime, but all the ones that we don't even know about that we've also had our prior embodiments. And so what we go through now is just coming to light. It's fructifying, coming to fruition, and we have to deal with it. And by dealing with it, we put in our self-efforts as best as we can by utilizing resources that we have access to, knowledge, getting help from other people. There's many different ways. Study of scriptures, receiving instructions from a guru, and practicing meditation on the self. All these are expressions of one's own self-effort. Without these, one cannot attain self-realization. And so these are all things that are required for self-realization, because self-realization is not going to come to somebody that is not putting in the self-effort, whether it's in regards to self-effort on the spiritual journey or practical life examples. To me, they both go together. There's no separating those. They go together, because our practical living is part of our spiritual journey, because that's where we have a lot of our experiences and our trials that we are put through, which build our character. And it helps us basically practice what we preach, put into practice the things that we learn, and it develops the personality and our character, who we are. And it reminded me, sometimes I bring up the Bible because I was actually raised Christian. I was an Episcopalian. And so I do a lot of crossover between different scriptures. But In the Bible, in the book of Colossians, chapter 3, verse 23, it says, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for men." So what that means is it's also in regards to self-effort, and putting in the self-effort not for the glory of men or for the approval of others or fitting in, but you're putting in the self-effort for God. You are doing it as a service to God, and there's no ego and there's no selfishness in that type of action. And so, once again, it's self-effort. Whoever desires to gain prosperity must detach his mind from inauspicious activities and direct it to the blessed task of divine realization. This is the sum and substance of all scriptural teachings. And so we learn, as part of our journey, we learn about detachment, which is sometimes seen in a negative light, but it actually really isn't. Detachment is just understanding the illusoriness and the temporariness of worldly objects and worldly things, and by detaching from these things, it's more of you're not allowing these worldly things to have control over you. And so you still have your worldly things, like I still have worldly things, but I don't let them define who I am. They're utilized more as tools. There isn't an attachment to these things. And so we also learn to detach from inauspicious activities. And so if you're someone that goes out like partying or drinking, spending a lot of time being just like idly wasting time, gossiping, things like that, things that are just inauspicious activities. And so we detach from that, and then the mind attaches to God, and the mind attaches to auspicious activities like attending Satsanga and studying scriptures, listening to the teachings of our gurus, and things like that. And so divine realization is the sum, like, of everything put together. It's going to equate to divine realization, and it's also the substance of all the scriptural teachings, because that is what they are all based around. O beloved child, endeavor to attain that which is glorious and eternal, not that which is petty and perishable. This is the theme of all spiritual instruction. It is by self-effort that men attain success in their projects. So once again, self-effort is required in no matter what we do. There's always self-effort. It is by the virtue of self-effort that wise men grow in their spiritual majesty. All talks of destiny are meant for wiping the tears of the weak-minded. It is merely for the sake of consolation that people condemn destiny as the cause of their adversities. So what this means is, like, if, for example, someone goes through a situation which is really challenging or it's really hard to deal with, and in order to overcome it, there's going to be a lot of self-effort that's necessary and required. But in that moment, they're not in the headspace. They're not in the mindset of being okay with doing that. And so they blame destiny, and they sit back and put it all on destiny. and saying that that is the cause of the adversity that they're going through. And most people will turn to this and say this because it is easier to blame a fictitious destiny than it is to understand and take ownership of our own actions and lack of self-effort in not just the current embodiment, but our prior embodiments. Because it can be hard to wrap your head around, especially the unknown, and the unknown of past embodiments is what most people are experiencing. They want to know about past embodiments, and then without knowing, it's kind of easier to just condemn destiny due to a lack of understanding. But destiny is not the cause of the adversity. The cause of the adversity is our lack of self-effort, whether it's in this embodiment or previous embodiments, and the accumulation of karmas and how they're working themselves out throughout all of these embodiments. Everything is achieved in this world as a result of self-effort. It is by self-effort that one eats his food. It is by self-effort that one goes to a particular destination. Wise men were able to cross over raging oceans of adversities by their self-effort. And so even the simple tasks of eating our food each day, we're putting in self-effort. You're putting in self-effort when you wake up in the morning and you open your eyes and you choose to stand up and you get out of bed. You put your feet on the floor. You begin walking. You are putting in self-effort, whether you're thinking about it consciously or not. There's always self-effort. And so no one can say that they are just going to sit back and do nothing, because it's actually impossible to do nothing. By taking recourse to good association, one becomes inclined to the study of scriptures. By study of scriptures, the intellect becomes subtle and purified. By the practice of scriptural knowledge and by the service of one's preceptor, one develops spiritual understanding. With the increase of spiritual understanding, bodha, one becomes more devoted to one's preceptor as well as to the scriptures. This leads to one's ascent on the ladder of spiritual wisdom. This is the brief plan of that self-effort, which leads to self-realization. So it's kind of like, in a nutshell, if the goal is self-realization, then the plan is going to be put in the self-effort, study the scriptures, learn to practice meditation, reflection, serve your preceptors, your guru, and then develop the spiritual understanding. And that comes from the self-effort. And when you develop the spiritual understanding of the scriptures and how things work in the world and the cosmos and everything, you become more devoted to it. And so once you become more devoted to it, you willingly and easily put more time into it and more effort. And so that effort just keeps building and building and building. So it is 8:40. We still have 15 minutes. So we're moving on to section 8, the illusion of destiny. So Sage Vasistha is continuing on speaking to Lord Rama. O Rama, out of ignorance, people talk of destiny. Like every other type of false knowledge, destiny has no form, no activity, no definite size or shape. The mind creates a pattern of causation in the environment of ignorance. And so the mind can come up with reasoning and excuses for why we're in the situation that we're in, because it is, for human beings, it's a lot easier to blame basically anything outside of ourselves than to blame ourselves. It develops the idea that I am reaping the result of the karma that I sowed during my past days. Such expressions are sustained by mere words without the basis of a practical reality. So this is in regards to people that are sitting back and blaming destiny by also saying, well, it's just a result of the karmas from my past days. So it's still another excuse, because in that equation, there is no self-effort. They're not taking ownership of those karmas that they produced by their actions. They're just blaming them. And so there's no practicalness to what they're doing. An insight into the law of karma must enable one to discover the innate freedom of the soul to overcome all conditioning circumstances and obstructing conditions. So when we understand how karmas work, and how we have a combination of good karmas, bad karmas, positive, negative karmas, combination karmas, and we have basically like a bank of them. And if you kind of think of them like they all kind of have fruition dates on them per se, and so they come to fruition at different times. And so that is not just in one embodiment, it's during all different embodiments for a very, very, very long time. But when you understand how karmas work and how you can use the karmas to your advantage, and the amount of power and freedom that you have to overcome the circumstances that you were put in respect to, there are certain populations of people in certain conditions, living conditions, environment, financial situations, etc. But no matter the circumstances and what obstructions might pop up which make things more challenging, we still have that willpower. We still have that power to make a choice of sitting back and giving up, or make the choice of putting in self-effort however we can in that practical matter. So like an example, I've been having to deal with my health stuff, and I could have just sat back and said, well, I must have done something really bad in an embodiment, and now I'm reaping what I sow, and I'm just gonna sit back and suck it up and let destiny take reign. That would be really ignorant. So instead, I have to put in the self-effort and be practical and do all the things necessary that I know I'm supposed to do. And my self-effort and practicality of things needs to be stronger than the self-effort that I put into things in the past. And so understanding how those karmas work and adding in the amount of self-effort, it's like an equation, and you can overcome obstructing conditions and obstacles. But when one seeks consolation by asserting the law of karma, he is resigning to a process of inertia. So when you only sit back and say, oh, well, I guess that's karma, or I guess that's my destiny, and you're not putting in self-effort, you're not being practical, you're resigning to the process of inertia. So inertia is stillness and non-movement, and so you're not doing anything to make the situation better or easier, and you're not working towards the better outcome. The negative activity of the past is corrected by the positive activity of today. So like I was saying, how in my personal situation with my health and knowing I need to put in self-effort on the practical matter as well as on the spiritual side of things, but I have to be practical in my self-effort by taking my medications like I'm prescribed, and doing whatever physical therapy I might need to do, and getting tests and scans done and things like that. And so I have to do those things in order to correct the negative activity of the past that put me in this situation. And so instead of just relying on karma or destiny in my situation, I'm choosing, I have free will of choice to put in that effort. So as challenging as it might be, and as stressful as it might be sometimes, I continue to do what I know I need to do. By the force of self-effort, even the fructifications of an evil action prove positive and auspicious in the life of an aspirant. Painful conditions are confronted by an aspirant in a spirit of austerity. And so in these painful conditions that we go through as a human, in a human embodiment, they become seen more as an austerity. And so you understand why you're going through it, why you need to go through it, and what is gonna come from it once you overcome this obstacle and you work through whatever the situation might be. So it might be painful at first, but you know that's temporary also. That's also it's also illusory, because everything other than self, the divine self, is temporary. Thus, though they are the result of sinful karmas of the past, yet they give rise to internal strength when one adopts the proper attitude towards them. So when we have a more positive and proper attitude towards these challenges and these painful conditions that arise in our human embodiment, we can pull on the divine strength, that internal strength within us. And by doing so, our attitude can change. And so even though things can be hard, challenging, upsetting, emotional, we're not giving in to those feelings. We feel them, we can acknowledge them, but we also work through them so we can overcome them. An utter reliance on destiny is sustained only by the dull-witted. If such reliance has any validity, then such people should jump into a blazing fire with the conviction that unless destined, fire cannot burn them. And so that's kind of just saying, in a way, how ridiculous it is to rely on destiny alone. If one holds the false doctrine of absolute predestination, there should be no need for him to perform any action at all. He should not even engage himself in actions such as bathing, sitting, walking, talking, eating, giving in charity, and the like. There should be no need for spiritual teachings. So this paragraph is kind of said in like a bit of a sarcastic kind of manner. So it's like, well, if it's true that you can just sit back and let destiny take the reins, then no one would have to do anything at all. No one would have to put in any effort. We wouldn't have to put in effort in bathing and staying clean, eating our food. It would be effortless to get up, sit down, lay down. Basically every action you could think of. But such a philosophy can be maintained only by the dead. It is impossible for the living to stop activity even for a second, which is so true. You can stand absolutely still and hold your breath for as long as possible and not move a single muscle. You're still performing activity. Your body is still going haywire crazy due to cellular activity on this cellular level that we can't even see, we can't witness. Like, there is so much activity even on the palms of your hands that is happening. There's so much activity on our face, on our skin. There's so much activity in our stomachs, in our heart, in our lungs. Our blood flow is moving. There's oxygen moving. So no matter how still we may be, there is always action. The dull-witted have created an illusory concept of destiny in their minds. Whoever depends upon destiny and does not take recourse to self-effort goes to his own destruction. But the wise men attain the fulfillment of their desires and the goal of their life by taking recourse to self-effort alone. So that's simply saying that the people who choose to rely on destiny and not put in the self-effort to whatever it is that they're doing, they're just walking down the path towards their own destruction. They're not going to accomplish what they're wanting to accomplish because they're just sitting back, being lazy, falling into a state of inertia and non-activity, non-movement. But men who are wise, they attain the fulfillment of their desires and goals in their life because they choose to put in the self-effort. So, like going to college and getting a degree, you have to put in self-effort. To find a job, you have to put in self-effort. To create a family, you have to put in self-effort. To maintain a family, you have to put in self-effort. Having relationships and friendships and keeping in touch with family, it all takes self-effort. Traveling takes self-effort. Having money to buy groceries and food and the things we need takes self-effort. Getting up in the morning and bathing takes self-effort. Every action, there is self-effort behind it. Is it possible for a true hero to wait for destiny in order to perform his efforts? Even those who have been prophesied to live long by astrologers cannot survive if they are slain by a sharp sword. And those who are supposed to become great scholars do not become so without taking recourse to study and other efforts. And so these are examples of, so even people who are prophesied to have a long life. So if you're someone who follows astrology, like Vedic astrology, and if someone's predicted to live a long life, well, that doesn't mean they can just sit back and not be careful and not be practical and not put in self-effort to avoid things. You can't just be told, oh, you're going to live a long life, and then be careless and walk out in the middle of traffic, because you're obviously not putting in any self-effort to live a long life. And so you can't rely on destiny alone. And so, like the other example, people who are supposed to become great scholars, they don't become a great scholar without putting in self-effort for studying or going to school or learning under the guidance of gurus and teachers, and being immersed and involved in the world of academia. The ancient Puranas are replete with examples of the glory of self-effort. This sage Vishwamitra attained Brahmanhood by his immense self-effort. Even the demons were able to overpower the gods by their self-effort alone. And in their turn, the gods defeated the demons by their self-effort. So even in the other scriptures, there's examples of how important self-effort is and how powerful self-effort is. Because even the demons were able to overcome the gods by putting in enough self-effort, and then vice versa, the gods were able to overcome the demons by putting in even more self-effort. Therefore, Sri Rama, do not become deluded by the illusion of destiny. Take recourse to the best form of self-effort and attain self-realization. And so Sage Vasistha is ending this section by reminding Sri Rama to don't be deluded by the illusion of destiny, because it's just an illusion. We all have to put in self-effort, and so he's guiding him to take recourse to the best form of self-effort in order to attain self-realization, which we know is the study of scriptures, being under the guidance of a guru, a practice of meditations, and working on negating the demoniac qualities that we all have within us, and then letting them develop into divine qualities, and overhauling our personalities and who we are, and being inspired by all of these sages and saints that are in the scriptures, but also the ones who are still in their embodiment and who are present here on earth. So I hope everyone enjoyed this evening. Sorry, I'm struggling a bit because of medications. So next week will be section 9, the illusoriness of actions and the reality of the self. Thank you and divine blessings to my mouse on my computer's not working. To everyone who attended. Kyle, Maharaj, Nandini, thank you, divine blessings. Aisha Ji, Om Tat Sat, divine blessings. I hope you're doing well. And to anyone who will watch this later, whether here on Facebook or on YouTube, it'll be uploaded to YouTube later. So I hope everyone has a good evening and get some rest. And may the Lord just bless everyone with good health and prosperity, patience and understanding through whatever challenges and adversities and obstacles that are coming up in this current embodiment that we are all living through, and just guide us on the path of righteousness and to do what is right and to stay on the holy path and not get distracted by worldliness and all the things going on in the world, and be aware of it, but don't get sucked into it. And may all be blessed. Om Tat Sat. Divine blessings, everybody.